me, Mario!
Several years ago, I was talking with some folks about the need for Nintendo to enter into the world of cinema. They were very much trying to make more games, they were getting into some TV shows, but I kept feeling like they were missing out on a great opportunity. Their world is very artistic, has a lot of personality to it, and so it was kind of inevitable that at some point that we were going to get to see the world of Mario brought to the big screen. Now, granted, they had tried that before in the past. There was some very painful attempts to try and make a Mario movie.
Plumbers! Are you telling us that you can arrest the guy for being a plumber? Get out of here! Get in there, plumber!
But it just did not connect with the audience. It was very strange. It felt out of place.
What is this?
It didn't feel like Mario in the slightest. This film, by contrast, though, is. So a couple of years ago, when I first heard that they were going to be making a Mario movie, I thought, well, that's hopeful. I didn't have any confirmation at the time, and so it was more of just wishful thinking. Detective Pikachu came out, and so did Sonic, and I started getting some hope for it, because they'd yet to actually really dive headlong into making Mario. But they were already off to a good start. Those films that came out that were also from Nintendo characters was very well done.
Nailed it!
There was a lot of respect given to it, a lot of great characters. They were changing it from the original story, but I felt like they were changing it for the better.
I just thought you might like a latte with steamed Austrian goat milk.
Of course I want a latte. I love the way you make them!
If nothing else, changing it so that a wider audience would get a chance to really appreciate it. So when the first trailer for this film came out a couple of months ago, the world that they introduced us to was fleshed out, it was detailed, and I started thinking this is going to be a great film. Now, I wasn't saying it openly because I didn't know if they were actually going to be able to live up to the hype that they were building. And then there were other things that were taking place. People were on the fence about whether or not this film was going to be everything that they had dreamt that it was going to be. But overall, I think that Nintendo actually put a lot of those concerns to rest. Right now, I'm joined by Rolling Chairs, who also just saw the film, and we're both going to kind of go over the pros and cons of this story. For the most part, I thought it was really good, and the feelings that I had with the first trailer and the feelings that I had with the film, it was perfect. There wasn't anything that was spoiled. There wasn't anything that I was really let down by. I was only given the experience that I had kind of been wanting to have from a Mario movie.
Here we go. Here we go.
When it was first announced, obviously, like most people, I had questions about Chris Pratt's casting. All those doubts seem idiotic. He killed it. But I wasn't too hooked on the idea of it. I did like that it was completely animated when you compare it to Sonic, where it's half animated, half live action. That's not a huge draw for me. The trailer that really got me on their side was the ad in the movie where they released that Super Mario Bros. Ad. For some reason, that ad just cracks me up.
That trailer is actually a good point, because when that trailer first came out, that's the one that gave me real confidence that it was going to be successful. It looked like it could have actually belonged with some of the past Mario products, in particular with the TV shows and whatnot. It gave us kind of a connection between all these different versions of Mario and gave it some respect, but also at the same time said, we're going to try and do this right. And that is something they definitely did with this film. The world that they're in is so very rich compared to what I've come to expect from a company trying to build upon another company's franchise. That's probably the big thing, is that Nintendo did not directly make this. They were commissioning this through another studio. And that studio actually did justice to that world, to the point of where there was very little that I really had to complain about in terms of the art style. Now, I still think that there were some ways that it could have been improved upon, but compared to anything else that is out there, it's hard to beat. It is very hard to beat. And Sonic's a good example. A lot of people did not like that Sonic was in a live action film, and some people would have really preferred to have seen it in a completely animated world. There is something you get in animation you just do not get with any live action film. And this film, I think, captures the reason that is the case. When you have it completely animated, you have complete control over what this world looks like. You can have personalities show through that maybe you wouldn't have gotten if it was somewhere in between. You can make things look like it belongs in the world. And what's more, for those that are fans of the game, the models that you're working with will have a lot more accuracy to the in-game world that people are familiar with. And that's some of the best elements of this story, is that it's not just well told. It's not that the acting is good. It's that everything is put together in such a way that it just leaves you with this desire to see more. And with this film being one of many, as we understand, especially after the credits scene, it gives me a lot of hope for the future. It makes me really want to look forward to the next film when it comes out. When I was seeing the film, there were some moments where it connected really well. There are some that didn't necessarily connect as well for me, but for the most part, every scene was well thought out and really left me with a very good experience. There are some scenes that were just a little over the top, but for the most part, it still was true to the characters that they were creating. There were some Easter eggs that were all throughout the film that apparently some people were more familiar with than me. And so when they saw it, they would laugh in the theater and I would laugh at other ones. But each of us had a different experience based upon the Easter eggs we were familiar with, based upon our experience with Mario up until this point.
Does this thing work?
Yes, what's great, you just have to blow into it.
I mean, I like the Toads. I would be lying if I said if I know this universe through and through. I'm a very basic fan of Nintendo. For me personally, I'm not the most versed in the history and lore of all Nintendo. So for me, it was almost like I'm trying to piece together where's Waldo and like try and point them all out. But I did really like to see the Shy Guys personally, and seeing Diddy Kong just pop up for a second gave me a little chuckle. I thought that was pretty fun.
There were a ton of characters. And honestly, for a first film, for them to have as many characters in this film as they did is actually commendable. That's a lot of modeling that they had to do. That's a lot of rigging to build up this world so that it felt lived in, added to the entertainment in a way that I greatly appreciated. There were a lot of great aspects of this story, but I gotta say, the thing that stood out to me most as a way that they could have improved was the music. No, it didn't have to do with the piece of music that Jack Black sings as Bowser. That was absolutely hilarious, and if you've not heard it yet, it is definitely a memorable tune.
Peach, you're so cool.
And will haunt you for the next few hours after you've seen the film, like it did me. But it's more about the music that was absent from this story. See, this was a piece of music that actually fit in with the world, it fit in with the story, and really developed the film that you're watching. But there was some music that they would add in that really did not fit with this world. It was modern music that was trying to add some culture to this area, maybe just add in something catchy in the background so they can go through showing us all the visuals. but it didn't set well with me by comparison. It was too modern, and it could have been better if they had actually made music that was specifically designed for the world that we were in. Because when they did it, it was hilarious. It was perfect. But when they didn't, it fell flat. It didn't leave me inspired, and it didn't fit with the universe that they were building up. When they did have Nintendo music as a whole, I very much appreciated it. I think they did a good job with that. Now, some of it was a little weaker than other times, but for the most part, it still sounded like the world of Mario.
The best moments with the music were with Jack Black, Peaches, because it expanded on his character and his goal in this movie. But also, when he's playing that piano, he just starts playing a tune from the games, and it's just like the little moments like that with the songs that we all know and love. It made it better, and then they cut to a song like "I Need a Hero," or it just felt so out of place in this movie, and I would have much just preferred. I would have been fine if the only song they added was the Peaches song, and then they just played the beats from the game. Yeah, it felt really out of place with the modern music.
I think a lot of studios struggle when it comes to music because it takes a lot of time, a lot of money to develop good pieces of music and songs. You can't just churn songs out. When you do, it usually falls flat. And so when things actually are done quickly and they succeed, it many times takes people by surprise. I feel like this song, though, of Peaches, it felt a little last minute. And it might have been that they weren't even planning to do it. I'm not entirely sure. But it was really well done, and it fit the character of Bowser perfectly. And it makes me wonder if they're actually going to do more of these sorts of songs in the future. And if they do, I very much look forward to hearing what those ones sound like. There is one thing I wish had been approached differently in this film. And unfortunately, I'm not sure it could have been done based upon the studio that was making it. And that goes down to, I think that this story feels too much like an Illumination film. That being said, that doesn't mean that's necessarily bad. It just doesn't feel like Mario at times. For the most part, it does feel like Mario, and I think they did a great job at capturing this world better than almost any other studio out there, save one. And this is my own personal opinion on this, because I think Blue Sky could have done this film better. Now, Blue Sky is no longer around, at least not the way that they used to. Once Disney bought them, their ability to do films like this probably disappeared. And compared to how Illumination did The Grinch versus how Blue Sky did Horton Hears a Who, I think Blue Sky was better at telling stories like this. Now, it could be that in the future, Illumination will kind of be able to veer away from the look and feel that their studio has in these sorts of films. But for now, it definitely feels like it more belongs in the world of Illumination than in Nintendo. Some of the characters are a little bit different looking compared to what I would have expected for a Nintendo character. Now, it makes sense. Your characters are going to be changing based upon the medium that you're trying to tell the story in. If you're telling a live action, it's going to look really strange. But when you tell it in 3D, you have more control to make sure things are authentic to the world. And sure, you're not going to get all the models to be exactly the way that you want them to be. You want them to all feel like they're part of the same universe. And that's something Nintendo characters don't necessarily have. You have the world of Mario. You have these characters that do look like they kind of belong in the same universe. And then you have the addition of the Donkey Kong arc. And so these characters don't necessarily fit with Mario immediately. And so it's understandable that they were going to have to change something. I just wish that they would have stayed true to a little bit more in line with the video game characters. But for the most part, I think they still did a good job. Joke-wise, I think they could have improved it a little bit. Some of it was a little childish at times, but for the most part, the humor was spot on. It was full of Easter eggs. It was hilarious. But I still think it could have been just a little bit better had Blue Sky been involved. But still, well done in Illumination. Very much appreciated the work and effort you put into this film, and I look forward to seeing where you take the story from here.
It was a good movie, something that the whole family can enjoy together. Got a few laughs. It was simple and straight to the point, easy to enjoy. Yep, I highly recommend it.
Now, before we end off, we are going to give this a score. We go with a different scoring system around here. We're still developing it, but it's going to be looking at the characters, the dialogue, the action, the settings, the plot, voice, performance, or animation in this case, and the art style of the story, and then trying to find what that ranking would be. Characters.
I would give it an 8. I really liked Mario and Luigi, Peach, Bowser, and even Toad and Donkey Kong. Like, every character brought something to the table, and it was very interesting to watch.
I'm going to give the characters a 7. Overall, I think that the characters were good. There's some areas that it could have been improved upon slightly. I think I probably had more problems with the real world than the one that they enter into. Dialogue.
I would give it a 7. It wasn't bad, but there could have been more at certain times.
I'm going to be giving it an 8 because I think that a lot of the story was being developed by their dialogue, but there were a couple of areas that were weak. For the most part, though, it still was accurate to the world that they were in, is accurate to the lore that they were trying to build up. In that sense, they did well, but there was a couple of lines that did feel like they fell flat, and usually it seemed to revolve around some of their jokes. Action. Now, I gotta say, I really enjoyed the action of this film. That is a 9, because there are still some areas that could have been improved upon, but overall, I liked the action of this story.
Yeah, I would give it a 9 as well. I think they did really good with it.
Setting. I'm going to give the setting an 8, because overall, I think that this world is very well built. There are some areas where the differences between the worlds or the lands is not as well blended together as I would like, but for the most part, it is spot on. Some of the most problems I have, again, are with the New York side of the story. But there's some other issues that transpire with some of these lands, and I think it's partially that we're not spending enough time in them, and so thus we can't get enough time to appreciate the work that they've put into it.
I would actually give it a 9. I really liked Mushroom Kingdom. I liked the Jungle Kingdom. Bowser's floating palace. Everything looked cool. I was very impressed with it. The weirdest part of it all was, like you said, it was with New York. It was just, it doesn't compare to everything else we saw. And then the Rainbow Road just kind of appearing out of nowhere. That kind of was just out of left field.
Plot. Now, overall, I like the plot of this story, but it also is kind of a little predictable. The way that it improves, though, is that the characters make it better. I will actually give the plot an 8, not because I think it's original or anything really surprising. It's that they take a story that is predictable and they make it enjoyable.
I completely agree with everything you just said, and I would also give it an 8 as well.
Voice acting.
I was very impressed with the voice acting. Obviously, Jack Black is carrying the film. He's got some experience in voice acting. I wish we got a little more from Charlie Day. He's very talented. You know, he can sing as well. Obviously, the huge hot topic of voice acting for this film was Chris Pratt. And within 15 minutes of the film, you don't even realize it's Chris Pratt. So I was very impressed with it. There could have been many things that had gone wrong with casting a bunch of A-list celebrities. You know, it could have been hard to forget the celebrities and really immerse into the characters. But they managed to do it, and I would give it an 8.
I'm going to give the voices a 9. Not because I think that they're the best voices that could have been in these character roles. I wish very much that they had stuck more true to the original game's character voices. But I understand why they changed it, kind of similar to the art style of this world. It got changed in order to try and make everything fit in better. You mentioned it earlier, but for Jack Black, he really carried this story. He was top-notch as Bowser. I know people wanted to have his voice being all deep. This worked out perfectly for him. Now, I do wish that they had maybe thrown in an Easter egg of him doing a laugh that was from the game, but I understand why they had to change his voice because of the character that they're trying to convey. Chris Pratt as Mario was such a non-issue. People were trying to blow up the story and make it oh so terrible that Chris Pratt was voicing it. I think it's partially because Chris Pratt does have a lot of people that don't necessarily want to hear him again in a role like this, and because the voice actor of Mario is still around. And so I can understand why people would not want to have him in that role, but he did a good job. And for the most part, you're right, Roland Chairs, you can barely tell that it's Chris Pratt at times. He really nailed this role well based upon the world that they're trying to build. Luigi did good. Actually, I think Luigi's voice was a little weaker than Mario's as a whole, but he did good as well. I still appreciated it, and none of these characters made me wish that they would leave the screen. There are some times where you see a film and a character's voice just grates on you the wrong way, and you don't want to hear it anymore. But in this film, every character, for the most part, was enjoyable to see and really carried their role well. Animation and performance. Animation as a whole, I think, was good. It could have been better. It is a little weak at times, and I think this is part of the Illumination studio itself. I think their style is simpler, and so for that, I give it a 7. I think it could have been better.
I would give it a 7 as well. There were some awesome shots, especially with Bowser's Palace flying through the air and stuff. There were some beautiful shots, but there are also some shots where it could have been better, in my opinion.
There's some really artistic shots as well throughout this film. There's some great action sequences, but in terms of just pure animation, a little too simple at times, or it was a little too complex. That's another thing that happens in animation like this. Sometimes you do things that are more complex than they should be, and you miss some of the better action, especially when we compare it to the animation and art style of Puss in Boots. This one definitely doesn't get anywhere close to how well that was in terms of animation. Art style. I think compared, now I'm just going to say based upon where I know this film could have gone, based upon past attempts to capture this IP, I'm going to give it a 9. It was so close to what it should be. Sure, the character models are slightly off, but for the most part, it is so close to the story that at times you could just imagine that they pulled some of these scenes almost directly out of a Nintendo product and used it as the template. Now, if it was just purely based upon art style in itself, I would have actually given it a lower score. But it's because I know that the world of Mario is very hard to capture, and past attempts have been very weak by comparison. And so that's the reason why I give it a 9. I would have given it probably closer to an 8 or a 7 at this point, just because I think that it's not the best, is the best art style that they could have done. But compared to any other Mario product, I give it a higher score just because I know it is a very complex world to try and capture.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with the art style. I mean, the coolest looking stuff on screen, and that's my basic terms of animation because I know very little, was Bowser's Palace and Mushroom Kingdom and the Jungle Kingdom. Like, all the kingdoms looked cool. And there were some awesome shots of Bowser and they got some cool close-ups. It really looked like a turtle dragon. I was pretty impressed with it. I can't go too much into it because I don't know a whole bunch about animation, but I would give it an 8.
Now, granted, I'm sure there's some people, they probably would give it a higher score. I know that if I was to see this film again, I probably would give it a higher score. But based upon this system that we're trying to run with, we're just solely trying to look at the different elements and find a way to properly record them in such a way that an audience kind of knows where this falls, solely based upon the elements of character, dialogue, action, setting, plot, voice, performance, and art style. If I was to give this film a score as a whole, I would definitely say it is fairly close to an 8, maybe even a 9. But it's definitely not a 10. But when we look at Puss in Boots, I think that one's between a 9 and a 10. This film is definitely between an 8 and a 9. Overall, I think that this film is great. Definitely worth the watch. If you're a Nintendo fan, you will enjoy it. If you're not a Nintendo fan, you will still get a chance to kind of understand what this world is like and get a chance to feel like you can connect with it without having to have played the games beforehand. And hopefully, if someone is there with you that did play the games, they can be able to point out all these little things afterwards, because there are Easter eggs galore throughout this entire thing. Very enjoyable. Definitely lived up to a lot of the hype that they built for it, and I very much look forward to seeing where they go with this film in the future. Overall, this was a great experience, and highly encourage you to go out and see this film. This film is exactly tailored to be something that both fans of Nintendo and also people who are brand new to this franchise can appreciate and enjoy. The characters are endearing, the world is well built and well designed. I think that even things like the music will probably mesh well with a good many people. It just didn't mesh well with us. But overall, I still think that they did a good job with it. We'll be covering this stuff a little bit more over the coming days, so if you find this stuff interesting, be sure to subscribe and be sure to mention things that you would like to see in regards to the Mario film or other films that are currently coming out that you want to see us review.
Let's go.
Let's go.